Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crayden. Thank you for joining me. Breaking news today. I know we're about an hour and a half out of it, but it's Joe Biden is stepping down, something I have been predicting if you read my columns and my news stories for at least the last 4 weeks. And when I first heard this announced on Redacted, as you know, I'm a guest there every week with Clayton and Natalie Morris. I said, I don't know if that's going to be possible. I just can't see how it's going to happen. But I looked into it. I looked into how it is possible to bypass the primaries. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. So the news is out today. I don't know if Joe Biden is even aware if he's dropping out of the race. I don't know if Joe Biden knows he's endorsing Kamala Harris, his vice president, as the next Democratic presidential candidate. I don't know if Joe Biden knows it's Sunday today. It's impossible to say. But we're going to be discussing this here with my good friend, Marc Patrone from Saga 630. He's on. Of course, you usually know it's usually the other way around. Marc is interviewing me on his morning show. But I thought, what better thing to do today? It's a Sunday. Let's give Marc a call and see if we can bring him on. And that's about what we're going to do here. So, Marc, thank you for joining me.
Great to be on your terrific show, David. And yeah, you're usually on my show at Saga 960. And so
Yeah.
it's only a matter of time. And I'm more than happy to appear on your show. We've certainly touted your terrific program on my show. So what an honor it is to appear on yours. Thank you.
Well, it's so nice to have you. God bless you. And the news never stops these days, does it? We had, the assassination attempt last weekend against former President Donald Trump. We have been waiting every day now for an announcement from Joe Biden about his future. He kept saying, nope, I'm in the race. I'm in the race. Every day we saw significant Democratic personnel, including donors, which money is the main thing to any political party, saying, no, we're not going to go with Joe Biden. So he announces today he's dropping it. Are you surprised at all?
No, not really. I mean, we've been predicting this for quite some time. And as recently as 2 days ago, he was still digging in his heels saying, no, I'm in it and I'm not leaving. And so, I mean, what happened? I can't help but think that the failed assassination attempt had something. I mean, can you imagine, God forbid, if that attempt had succeeded in taking out Trump, would Biden be leaving right now? You know what? Part of me thinks maybe not, because you look at the polling, hell, he's getting trounced in places like Michigan, in Virginia, in Nevada, states that the Democrats won handily in 2020, if you believe that it was a fair election, which I don't, but just the same. Uh, and also the donors, right? I mean, that was the other thing, I suppose, that probably went as far as they could to convince Joe Biden that there was no way they were going to support him and that he should step down. So, he's had people like Obama and other key Democrats. Joe Manchin was the most recent, saying, you got to go, Joe. And I guess he finally decided, no, I've had enough. So away he goes. And now what? What do we get? We get a lame duck president in there. There are calls for him to step down immediately. People asking a very valid question, David. If you can't run for president, how can you be expected to serve as president?
Well,
Many of us.
you anticipated my next question, of course, because a lot of people are comparing this to 1968, and there are a lot of parallels. I wrote a column about this recently in Human Events, the parallels between 2024 and 1968. And you've got a Kennedy in the race in both instances, but you also now have a lame duck president. Lyndon Johnson, though, dropped out of the race following a primary defeat in New Hampshire. And that was like March or April of the presidential year, the primary year, giving the party lots of time to find an alternative and making it quite clear that he was not going to be the Democratic choice in 1968. Joe Biden has waited literally here 3 months, 3 months and a couple of weeks before the next election, before announcing this. Is this even feasible? And Kamala Harris, I've got a clip I want to play in a minute here, but is Kamala Harris a viable alternative?
According to Joe Biden, she is, which is almost hilarious because the reports of Jill Biden and Kamala Harris being at each other's throats are legendary now. I mean, these two people really do not like each other. And from what I understand, the one thing that Jill Biden hated the most about the prospect of Joe leaving is that of having Kamala Harris take over. So clearly, there's no love lost between those two. Something must have happened in order to convince her to back off, or maybe he just decided, no, I've had enough. But yeah, he's endorsed her. But all the talk is of Hillary, though. David, you heard this today. Hillary Clinton apparently, according to people like Colonel Douglas McGregor, is going to be the one stepping in out of the blue and somehow finagling herself as the candidate going forward, which would mean that we could see a repeat of 2016's matchup, Trump
A
versus
rematch.
Hillary.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
rematch of 2016. Well, I say bring her on because I think she's a spent force. And I really don't think Michelle Obama, of course, has been touted as another alternative. I don't think Michelle Obama really wants to get into this race. Clearly, she could have done it previously had she really wanted it. I don't have a lot of time or respect for Michelle Obama, but I don't think she really wants to get involved in the presidential race at this point. Hillary Clinton, yeah, I can believe that for a minute. She really believes she's destined to be the greatest president in history. She really believes that about herself. I don't think anybody else of sound mind believes that. But here's a couple of clips I wanted to show our audience and you as well of the extent, how articulate Kamala Harris has demonstrated herself to be.
And what can be and be unburdened by what has been,
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Where we can be unburdened by where we have been and unburdened by where we are right now.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What could be unburdened by what had been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
So that goes to show you she's learned one talking point very well, so well as she repeats it just about everywhere she goes. But I have listened over the years to Kamala Harris, and she presents nothing but mindless word salads in terms of her trying to enunciate any sort of policy positions. And it was pointed out to me today that she's never had to really run a campaign by herself. She has never really, she's always been foisted into position, whether it was when she was a prosecutor in California, whether she was a senator. She's always been put in this position, and other people have done the work for her. And she's doing this again now. Once again, she's totally ill prepared for this. She really has no preconditions to be president. And yet she's going to be put in the public face. And yes, this is your choice, Democrat. I feel sorry for Democrats who think their party really is democratic. And this is what the irony of this for me, Mark, is that the Democratic Party goes back to the 1830s with Andrew Jackson. This really was a party that was at one time democratic, even though the vote was not exactly applicable to everybody. The Democratic Party at least has democratic roots. It's no longer even that. When they can just throw out the results of the primaries, which came in, by the way, during the early part of the progressive era in the United States, when they can just throw those results out and say, oh, Kamala Harris is your choice. Don't you love her? I feel sorry for Democratic voters who are saying, we didn't vote for her. This is not our choice. I mean, how do you think the average Democratic voter thinks about this?
Same thing that they thought about Bernie Sanders being cheated out of his right to represent the party. I mean, they realize, I think you'd have to be blind not to know that the Democrat Party decides who the leader is going to be, and people can vote, party members can vote whatever way they want. It doesn't matter. I mean, we know from the WikiLeaks documents that Bernie was going to win, that Bernie was ahead, but it didn't matter at the end of the day because that primary was going to be rigged in favor of Hillary Clinton. And so now we're facing another scenario here where Kamala clearly wants it. And as I have come to believe, Hillary Clinton also really wants it and is going to try and push her aside. So you've got a civil war now happening in the Democrat Party. And to your point, if they're not going to choose a leader fairly, then there has to be some other way that these two are going to duke it out. And it's going to be decided, like the old Soviet Union used to decide the next leader of their party, right? It certainly wasn't up to any vote by the population, no, by the Russian people. No, the party itself decided who was going to succeed, Stalin when he died, and then Khrushchev when he left. There's an internal battle, and somebody emerges victorious, and they're the leader. And that, I think, is what the Democrat Party is. It's no different than the way that the old Soviet Union used to choose their leaders. I think the Democrat Party is doing it the same way. It's all going to be done in the back room, and somehow someone is going to decide who the representative is going to be, and the other person is going to just have to eat it.
Well, I think you're dead on in that analysis, Mark. Of course, I'm sure you watched the Republican National Convention, and I watched every night. In fact, I carried the last night live on my show because I thought this was going to be a very historic speech from Donald Trump. But what strikes me is the difference now between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is the Democratic Party is splintered now in probably about three ways. Whether you want Joe Biden to stay in, you like Kamala Harris, or you like the alternatives, which are what? Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama, Newsom from California. There's nothing resembling unity. And what impressed me about the Republican National Convention is that you had Donald Trump not only emerging from this assassination attempt with complete victory, but you had him saying, look, you don't want to join this, you don't want to be a part of this movement, don't be. But everybody came on board. We even had Nikki Haley, which I can't stand Nikki Haley, but we had 10 minutes of Nikki Haley essentially saying, I'm for Donald Trump too. And I'm not going to make an issue out of it. And you also had anybody else who had a problem with Donald Trump getting on board. But you also had Donald Trump not for a minute saying, I am going to compromise my principles. He was quite clear that he's still against foreign wars. He's going to stop the U.S. getting involved in every foreign war possible. He is a populist. He is a president who is going to fight for average Americans. I was so impressed to see union people there talking about the fact that, people who work for a living, not government unions, but real people who work for a living are saying, I think I like Donald Trump more than I do the Democratic Party, because the Democrats are inviting in 30, 40, we don't even know how many tens of millions of illegals. And it was a victory for Trump. And today is a defeat for the Democrats because they just don't know where they're going as a party. And I can't think of any other time the Republicans have been better placed for an election, except, and I have to say it, 40 years ago when Ronald Reagan was seeking his second term. The U.S. was hosting the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Americans were excited about being American again, and they loved their president. unlike who can't stand their president, and they want Donald Trump. So I think the Republicans are so well placed right now. This could be the biggest landslide, not just in terms of, there's two landslide votes. I have to explain this to viewers. Lyndon Johnson won the biggest landslide in terms of popular vote, 61.1% of the vote in 1964. The biggest landslide in history in terms of electoral college votes was Richard Nixon in 72, 4 years later. I think Donald Trump could win over 60% of the vote and perhaps capture a larger number of electoral college votes than even Richard Nixon won in 72. I think this could be the biggest year in history for the Republicans. And I hope they don't abuse that privilege, that they use it for the good of the country. But I think this could be a historic year for Republicans.
I hope you're right. I mean, I want to be as optimistic as you are. I mean, the difference, of course, between now and when Reagan won his huge landslide was the illegals that have been pouring in thanks to cooperation between the Democrat Party and, of course, the NGOs, those who are bringing in millions of people, millions of illegals into the country. And you know what? Those people are going to turn into voters. They don't even have to vote. And the Democrat Party can harvest those votes. What's working against them now, David, is the fact that so many Black Americans, so many Hispanics are bailing on the Democrat Party. I mean, forget all the other people that regularly punch the ticket for the Republicans. Now you've got other people who are sick and tired of the Democrats, and they see these millions of people pouring in, given free phones, health care, accommodations, food, and eventually the right to vote. And they're thinking, wait a minute, we need help here. Americans need help. And you're throwing billions of dollars and bringing in illegals. But that's who the Democrats are going to be relying on to be their base of support going forward. I mean, do you think that Joe Biden really got 81 million votes last time? They cheated that time, and they're going to cheat again. And so Republicans need to get to the polls to override what's coming up. It's nice to hear guys like Mark Zuckerberg talk glowingly of what a badass Donald Trump was, raising his fist the way he did after the attempted assassination last Saturday. But, you know, is he going to withdraw his support of the Democrats, of these ballot drop boxes that were so instrumental, if you believe in that documentary by Dinesh D'Souza, in, you know, allowing the Democrats to win, despite the fact that people didn't like Joe Biden, the fact that he ran a campaign from the basement of his residence or wherever he was. And so this is what concerns me. Okay, the Democrats always have an ace in the hole. They always manage to cheat. And I suspect they're going to do the best they can to rig it again in 2024. So if Republicans are going in there overconfident, they might be shocked to find out that they've lost again. And I certainly hope that that doesn't happen. I hate to sound an element of pessimism in all this. I hope that the Republicans win. I think that they will win. But I have to look realistically at what the Democrats are prepared to do. And they are literally prepared to do anything, and I mean anything under the sun, to hold on to power.
Well, I heard some statistics recently that the Democrats have to be well above the 5% corruption zone, meaning they have to have at least 5% imaginary votes to win this election in terms of the electoral votes. I don't think they're there. I don't think they can possibly pull this off like they did the last time. But, you know, that's, we will see. We will see. But I think you're right about where the Democrats are placing their hopes. And what I think Donald Trump, though, and this is something we've talked about this on your show. Donald Trump needs to follow through on his promise to deport these millions of illegals and get them out of the country. And don't just talk about it. I mean, we've had Trump talk about this. It was part of J.D. Vance's acceptance speech this week. He talked about deporting tens of millions of illegals. They need to do that. They need to actually follow through on that promise, because if they don't, it's going to happen again. Just like Donald Trump underestimated the deep state when he was president. He really, I think, thought these guys were just like a bunch of criminals that he dealt with in New Jersey. They were just a bunch of mafia types that he could contain, he could control. They didn't realize that they were that powerful. And when they went after him, impeachment, when they went after him with judicial examination, and then after he lost the election, as you say, the highly spurious claims, when they continued to go after him, I think it sunk in with Donald Trump that these people are not like the contractors in New Jersey. They're not like the people he used to deal with as a construction person, as a billionaire building billions, he understood that it was no longer the same. And I think that message has sunk through. And if Assassin's Bullet hasn't done that to him, to say, hey, these guys want me dead. They just don't want me out of the race. They want me dead. I think the message has sunk through. And I think this is a different Donald Trump. At the same time, the message has sunk through in terms of how important this is and how empowered his enemies are. He's also looking back and saying, I'm humble. I'm glad to be alive. I'm thanking God that I'm alive. I've never seen a more humble Donald Trump, who is appealing to those Democrats and those left-leaning Republicans who always said, well, he just seems a little too arrogant to me. He just seems a little too full of himself. I think Donald Trump this year is the Donald Trump for the ages. And I was all for Donald Trump in 2016. I was writing columns at the time for the Daily Caller. I thought he was the answer. I didn't like him. I thought he was obnoxious at times, but I said, this is what America needs. I supported him again 4 years later. I'm supporting him now because I think there's no other alternative for America. You need a guy with Donald Trump's moxie. You need a guy with Donald Trump's energy to take on the deep state. And I think he understands finally that deep state is real and it wants to kill him.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you go back to 2016, it was a slightly naive Donald Trump, wasn't it? Bringing in neocons like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo into the fold, and others who were undermining his presidency, while on one hand appearing to be on his side. And Trump at the time figured, well, we're all Americans. We're all kind of on the same side. We all want to win. And he thought that if he strengthened the country, strengthened the economy, which he did, and stopped the endless numbers of wars coming in, that somehow all these disparate elements in the country would rally behind him. What did we see? That wasn't the case. That the people who were supposed to be on his side were among the backstabbers that did everything in their power to stop him and stop his agenda. Why? Because we're not all on the same side. The reality is that there is a core of powerful Americans. You want to call them deep staters, the permanent bureaucratic class of people who have their hands on the levers of power, and they love war. They want nothing more than to perpetuate the wars that are now going on, whether you're talking about Ukraine or Syria. And of course, we're inching towards World War III. They want nothing more than to perpetuate this on behalf of the defense contractors. I mean, there's just so much money in killing other people and destroying humanity that these people, they're psychotics. And I hope and I think that now, based on what he has been saying, Trump gets it. And so now that's why they want to stop him. The one thing that does give me some sense of hope is that if they didn't think that Trump could win the election because they were going to cheat, then why would they try to murder him? Why would they try to assassinate him? Why have they tried to use lawfare to prevent him from running? So clearly, they feel that maybe Trump will get enough support to override the cheating that we fully expect the Democrats to do and the deep state to do. Because again, why try to prevent him from running? If you know that you can cheat to the point where you're going to win, well, who cares if it's Donald Trump or whatever candidate? The Republicans are going to end up getting beaten yet again. And so the fact that they were trying to stop him from running to the point of even having an assassin's bullet hit his ear tells me that they believe that Trump could win. So that gives me a certain element of optimism. But yeah, it'll be a different Trump, I would hope. Although you're still seeing the same crew of never Trumpers trying to weasel their way in. Thankfully, he picked a guy like J.D. Vance, which is pissing off the donor class and the Republicans and the establishment. So that tells me that Trump is serious. If he had picked a Marco Rubio or a Nikki Haley or someone like that, then it would have demoralized the MAGA people and maybe had people wondering whether or not Trump was going to go down the same road that he went in 2016. But I tend to agree with you. This is a different Trump. And
I said the same thing, Mark. If he had picked, God forbid, Nikki Haley or even Marco Rubio, I would not be supporting Trump's reelection because I would say it's the same damn thing over and over again. But I think J.D. Vance is a difference, and I think it's so important. I'll get you out of here on this question here because, as you know, I have been linking Justin Trudeau with Joe Biden's future, and we're on the verge of another. Trudeau had a little cabinet shuffle on Friday as he got rid of Seamus O'Regan, and he put one of his most obnoxious ministers in terms of labor. I just can't abide that minister. He's the most partisan piece of game in the whole trunk. But do you think that Justin Trudeau really thinks he can postpone his resignation and his oblivion by bringing Mark Carney into the cabinet, which he's surely aiming to do right now?
You obviously think it's worth a shot. I mean, what else is he going to do? Nothing else has worked. And so, as we've seen in the past, as Justin Trudeau is wont to do, he's going to find people to blame for his failures. Who's he blaming? Chrystia Freeland. Who's doing the dirty work, the nasty behind-the-scenes work of sticking the knife in and twisting it, leaking dirt to the media? Well, it's his trusty PMO. So it's the Katie Telfords of the world. It's his close team, tight little cabal who are undermining Chrystia Freeland. On one hand, kind of telling her, well, the job is yours for now. And on the other hand, trying to convince Mark Carney to join them. And they see him as a fixer, the guy who can come in, sell the carbon tax, which is really what this is all about. So much of the opposition to Trudeau is an opposition to this green agenda of his, which has been so economically devastating to so many Canadians. So you bring a guy like Carney, who's another elitist, another guy who never has to worry about going to the grocery store and spending more than he has on tomatoes or fish or something else to feed his family. No, Mark Carney doesn't have to worry about that. None of those people around Trudeau have to worry about that. But they need a guy who can put a fresh coat of paint on that government. And I guess they see him as that person. Now, whether or not he wants to do it, well, that's another matter altogether. But it tells you a lot about these people, that they're trying to blame Chrystia Freeland, whom by the way, I am no fan of. I don't care. I mean, good, to me, she deserves it. But, stick it to her, try to bring in Carney, and somehow hope that is the magic elixir that elevates Justin Trudeau to victory once again. I don't think it'll work, but he's certainly going to give it a shot.
But, once again, it's Justin Trudeau, the feminist Prime Minister, sticking it to his senior female cabinet minister.
Yep.
Just like he did to his
Jody
attorney general.
Yep.
Yes, and I felt bad for her because I thought this is a cabinet minister with some principles, because she was standing up to Trudeau and saying there's something wrong here. And Trudeau threw her under the bus. And just like he's going to do the Freeland, except Freeland thought, oh, there's no problem here. He's going to support me forever. And Justin Trudeau supports nobody but himself. He is the most narcissistic, most incredibly self-absorbed leader, I think, since, shall we say, Joseph Stalin?
Yeah, but
nobody else matters.
Was a lot smarter and a lot more ruthless. Was Joseph Stalin.
I think Justin Trudeau's days are numbered here, but we will see what happens, because I think as Joe Biden goes, I've been saying this for the last 4 weeks now, as Joe Biden goes, I think Justin Trudeau goes, and I think his days are numbered. As liberals read the wallpaper, as they understand it's over, that they cannot continue to do this to us. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me, Marc. This has been fascinating, and this is a very historic day in American and U.S. and world history, because this is the only time a U.S. president has ever resigned, or at least dropped out of the race, at the end of the primary system. This is totally unique. Never happened before. And I think this is indicative of the Democratic desire to destroy democracy. So thank you so much for your conversation here today. It's always fascinating, and I think you have elucidated this audience to a degree that you're not even aware. Thank you so much, Marc.
Well, David, it's been an absolute blast being on the show with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. You got a terrific program there with Stand on Guard. I think you've got a growing audience. You've got a very intelligent audience that expects the best and gets the best out of you every single time. So God bless you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again soon. Cheers, brother.
Okay, and I'll be on your show next week. You better believe it.
Thank you, sir. Maybe Wednesday.
Okay. All right. Okay, we love you.
Love you too, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.